the violin maker's quiet workshop. The workshop sat at the end of a narrow cobbled alley behind the old concert hall, easy to miss unless you already knew to look for the small wooden sign with a carved violin scroll above the door. And most people in town agreed it seemed to exist in its own particular slice of quiet, tucked away from the bustle of the streets beyond. Anton had kept the workshop for nearly 20 years now, ever since his own teacher had finally retired and passed the whole small business into his hands. And he had long since come to believe, the way his teacher always had, that the workshop only truly settled into itself on days exactly like this one, when the rain fell soft and steady, and the whole alley seemed to hold its breath along with it. Today had carried the particular gray stillness of an afternoon building toward rain since well before noon, the sky pressing low over the old rooftops beyond the alley, and Anton had felt it coming the way he always did. Some old instinct settled deep into his hands after 2 decades spent close to wood and varnish. He'd spent the morning readying the workshop for it, without quite admitting to himself what he was doing, clearing extra space on the long workbench, setting the small kettle on the little stove in the back corner, arranging his tools in their usual careful rows along the wall, each chisel and plane exactly where his hands expected to find it. By early afternoon, the first drops had begun tapping against the workshop's tall, narrow window, hesitant and scattered at first, and Anton paused in the middle of carving a violin scroll to watch them fall, feeling the same small anticipatory lift he always felt at the start of a proper rain. The workshop around him held its usual comfortable order, half-finished instruments hanging from the ceiling beams on soft cords, blocks of spruce and maple stacked along one wall, jars of varnish and rosin lined up with careful precision on a shelf above the bench. The rain thickened steadily through the early afternoon, settling into a full, unhurried rhythm against the glass, and Anton moved through his usual rainy day rituals with the same practiced calm he always carried on days like this, turning on the small radio in the corner to its familiar low murmur, lighting the brass lamp over his workbench, even though the workshop still held a few good hours of gray daylight, setting out a second mug beside the kettle, more out of habit than any real expectation that someone might actually find their way down the narrow alley in weather like this. The alley outside had gone a deep, wet gray in the fading light, the cobblestones slick and shining under the rain, and Anton stood a moment at the window, watching it, feeling the particular hush that always settled over the workshop in the first real minutes of a storm, the distant sounds of the town muffled and softened, the whole small alley seeming to lean in and wait. The small brass bell above the door rang for the first time a little after 1, and old Madame Suzuki came in shaking her umbrella carefully on the mat, the way she always did, making her way straight to the worn stool by the window where she liked to sit while Anton worked, though everyone in the neighborhood knew perfectly well she came in mostly for the quiet company rather than any pressing violin business. She settled in with a small book of crossword puzzles, chatting easily about the state of the alley's cobblestones after all this rain, in no particular hurry to head back out into the weather. More visitors trickled in as the afternoon wore on, each arrival announced by the small bell's familiar chime, each one greeted the way Anton greeted most people who stepped into his quiet workshop, with an easy warmth that made no particular distinction between the ones commissioning a full instrument and the ones simply needing a bow rehaired. There was old Mr. Castellan, first violin with the town orchestra for as long as anyone could remember, who came in most rainy Tuesdays to have some small adjustment made to his bridge, insisting, though Anton had never quite understood why, that the instrument only truly needed tuning on days exactly like this one. There was a young student named Nadia, new to the conservatory, who ducked in on her lesson breaks most rainy afternoons just to watch Anton work, never asking for anything at all, and Anton never once minded. The workshop filled slowly but steadily through the afternoon, never crowded exactly, but pleasantly full of quiet movement and low conversation, the gentle murmur of the radio mixing easily with the rain's steady percussion against the window, and the occasional soft chime of the bell announcing someone new ducking in out of the wet. Anton moved between his workbench and his visitors with the unhurried efficiency of someone entirely at home in his own small wood-scented kingdom, sanding, varnishing, pausing here and there to answer a question about which wood might best suit a particular tone, or, in Mr. Castellan's case, simply which small adjustment would most improve an already well-loved instrument.
This, he often thought on afternoons exactly like this one, was the whole reason he'd never once regretted the long, patient years of apprenticeship it had taken to earn this quiet alley workshop for his own, despite the meticulous, unhurried nature of a craft that rewarded patience far more often than speed. There was something deeply satisfying about a room full of people choosing, of their own accord, to spend a rainy afternoon exactly here, surrounded by the smell of wood shavings and varnish, while the whole rest of the grey world hurried past outside the window. It was while searching a low cabinet for a particular grade of sandpaper that Anton's hand brushed against something tucked far back behind a box of old strings, wedged into a corner he hadn't properly cleared out in years. He drew it out carefully and found a small, leather-bound notebook, its cover worn soft and dark with age, clearly his teacher's, clearly forgotten back there for years, tucked away and never quite gotten around to being properly found. He opened it carefully, settling onto his stool by the workbench while the rain kept its steady rhythm against the glass, and found his teacher's familiar, careful handwriting filling page after page, notes on wood selection and varnish recipes and small tricks of the trade, each one annotated with the particular confidence of someone who had spent decades learning exactly how each piece of spruce or maple would respond to the knife. Near the very back, tucked between two blank pages, Anton found a folded note in the same careful hand, addressed simply, "To whoever keeps this workshop after me." He unfolded it slowly, feeling something warm and unexpected rise in his chest, and read his teacher's words for what he realized, with a small jolt, must have been the very first time. A short, plainly written note explaining that the workshop had never really been about the instruments themselves, not entirely, but about giving people somewhere quiet and unhurried to sit a while, whatever storm happened to be passing over their lives that particular day, weather or otherwise. The rain brings in the ones who need to sit and listen more than the ones who need a repair, the note ended. Let them stay as long as they like. The wood will still be waiting when they're ready to go. Anton read it twice, eyes stinging faintly, before folding it carefully back along its original crease and tucking it into his shirt pocket, deciding it would stay there now, close at hand, on every rainy afternoon from here forward. The afternoon wore on unhurried, the rain never once threatening to let up, and Anton found himself falling into the particular easy rhythm that only ever showed up on days exactly like this one, a rhythm built less around busyness and more around simple, steady presence, moving between the workbench and his visitors, trading a few quiet words here and there, letting the workshop's low, warm hum carry everyone gently along together. A young man came in sometime around 3, soaked through despite a jacket clearly not built for this kind of downpour, cradling a violin case with the particular careful tenderness of someone carrying something that mattered a great deal. Anton recognized the look easily enough after 20 years in the business and left him be a while, tidying nearby tools, until the young man finally admitted, a little sheepishly, that the violin had belonged to his grandmother, silent in its case for decades, and he'd only just worked up the courage to see whether it could still be brought back to life. Anton opened the case carefully, examined the instrument with the particular reverence such things deserved, and spent a happy quarter hour explaining exactly what work it would need, reassuring the young man that these things, more often than people expected, could indeed be brought back. Madame Suzuki's crossword pencil scratched on steadily by the window, and she and Nadia had fallen into easy conversation about nothing much at all, the two of them trading opinions about which of the workshop's hanging instruments produced the warmest tone. Anton listened with half an ear while he worked, comforted by the low, familiar murmur of it, the particular music of a room full of people who had, in one unhurried rainy afternoon after another, slowly become something like a loose, easy community around his workbench. Outside, the rain had thickened further as the afternoon aged toward evening, the sky gone from pale grey to something deeper and more textured, the workshop's tall window fogging softly at its edges, the warm light inside pushing back gently against the darkening, sodden alley beyond the glass. Anton felt, watching it all, the particular contentment that only ever arrived on days like this, a room full of people he genuinely liked, surrounded by careful work and good wood, simply because everyone had finally slowed down enough to properly enjoy each other's company.
He began sorting a fresh delivery of strings a little before 5, moving them into their proper drawer with practiced hands, while half listening to Mr. Castellan recount, for what was probably the dozenth time, the exact story behind a small scratch on his instrument's back, the details growing more elaborate with each retelling over the years, though nobody seemed to mind the embellishments. Reaching for a fresh coil of gut string on the high shelf, his fingers found instead a small faded photograph tucked behind a box of old rosin cakes, curling slightly at the corners, clearly forgotten there for years. It showed his teacher, decades younger, standing behind this same workbench on some long ago rainy afternoon, sleeves rolled up, laughing at whoever held the camera, the workshop behind him recognizably the same and yet subtly different instruments hanging from the beams, but the same warm, crowded, rain-soaked feeling filling every corner of the frame. On the back, in the same careful hand as the notebook, someone had written only "Best kind of day, full workshop, bad weather, good wood and better company." Anton propped the photograph against the varnish jars, facing out into the room, deciding it belonged there now among the workshop's other small, quiet treasures, and went back to his sorting with a private smile, feeling, not for the first time this particular afternoon, the strange comfort of standing in exactly the same spot his teacher once had, on a day that felt, in all the ways that mattered, remarkably similar. Sometime around 6, the rain thickened further still, arriving in earnest now, drumming hard against the tall window with a fuller, more insistent rhythm than it had carried all afternoon. A low roll of thunder moved somewhere beyond the rooftops, distant but unmistakable, and the small group inside glanced up at once, the way people who have weathered plenty of storms together tend to, sharing a brief, knowing look before returning easily to their unhurried conversations. The wind picked up outside, rattling the old wooden sign above the door, and a fresh gust drove the rain hard enough against the glass that the instruments hanging from the ceiling beams seemed to sway faintly on their cords.
Anton moved to check the window was properly latched against the wind, an old habit from 20 years of exactly these evenings, and found, glancing out at the alley, that it had gone nearly empty now, except for the occasional hurried figure dashing between doorways, shoulders hunched against the downpour. Settling in for the night, by the look of it, Madame Suzuki observed, peering out at the darkening alley without pausing her crossword, and Anton nodded, already moving to check the back room's window was sealed tight against the damp, feeling the particular satisfaction of a keeper whose small, warm kingdom was once again exactly where everyone wanted to be on a night like this. He kept the workshop open a little later than usual, official closing time coming and going without much ceremony, since nobody currently inside seemed in any particular hurry to brave the storm, and Anton had long ago decided that a full workshop on a proper rainy evening was worth far more than the modest savings of closing on schedule. He refilled the kettle, offered a fresh cup of tea to anyone who wanted one, and let the evening simply continue at its own unhurried pace, the rain drumming steady and full against the window, the warm hum of quiet conversation filling every corner of the small room. The young man with his grandmother's violin left sometime around 7, instrument carefully re-wrapped and a full restoration scheduled for the following weeks, looking considerably lighter than when he'd arrived, and Mr. Castellan finally gathered his newly adjusted instrument a little after that, pausing at the door to thank Anton the same quiet way he always did, adding this time a small unexpected comment about how much the workshop had always reminded him of his own first teacher's studio decades ago, though he never did explain further, simply nodding once and stepping out into the wet dark with his collar turned up against the wind. Madame Suzuki and Nadia lingered a while longer, the two of them settling into one of those easy, meandering conversations that seemed built specifically for rainy evenings with nowhere else to be, and Anton let them stay, moving quietly around them, sweeping stray wood shavings from the floor, banking the evening's affairs towards their close without any particular hurry to usher anyone out. Nadia finally made her way back to the conservatory for her evening rehearsal a little after 8, and not long after that, Madame Suzuki packed away her crossword as well, the workshop slowly emptying out, the way it always eventually did, no matter how good the storm.
Anton stood a moment in the sudden quiet once the door had finally properly closed behind the last of them, listening to the rain's steady rhythm against the window, the low creak of the old building settling around him, the particular hush that only ever arrived after a full, warm evening had wound gently down to its close. He began the last small tasks of closing with the same unhurried care he carried through everything else, covering his unfinished instruments against the damp, banking the little stove low, sweeping the floor slowly in the low light, letting the day's accumulated small satisfactions settle properly into his tired shoulders. With the workshop finally closed and locked, Anton made his way up the narrow back staircase to the small flat above, the same one his teacher had lived in for decades before him, its low ceilings and creaking floorboards familiar enough by now to navigate easily even in the dim evening light. The rain sounded different up here, closer somehow, drumming directly against the roof rather than filtered through the workshop's tall window below, a fuller, more intimate sound that Anton had come over the years to find deeply comforting. He made himself a small pot of tea, carrying it to the worn armchair by his own small window, and sat a while simply watching the rain streak down the glass, feeling the particular satisfaction of a long, full day finally winding down toward its close. His teacher's notebook and the small folded note sat on the table beside him, along with the old photograph he'd found tucked behind the rosin cakes, and he found himself paging through the notebook again, slowly, in no hurry at all, reading his teacher's careful handwritten notes by the low lamplight. Near the middle of the notebook, tucked between a page of varnish formulas and one about the proper aging of spruce, Anton found another folded note he hadn't noticed earlier, shorter than the first, written in the same careful hand. It read simply, "Some days this workshop does more good than any of us realize. You never know who needed somewhere quiet to sit today. Keep the kettle on and don't ever rush a repair." Anton read it twice, thinking of the young man's grandmother's violin, of Mr. Castellan's small, unexpected comment about his first teacher's studio, of Madame Suzuki and Nadia's easy, unhurried conversation stretching long into the evening, and felt, reading it, a quiet certainty that his teacher had somehow already known exactly the kind of evening this would turn out to be, decades before it happened. He set the notebook down carefully, tea cooling now to its perfect drinking temperature, and let himself simply sit a while longer, listening to the rain's steady rhythm against the roof, feeling entirely uncomplicatedly grateful for the small, warm kingdom he'd been trusted with, for the teacher who had built its rhythms long before him, for the particular quiet purpose of keeping a door open on nights exactly like this one. The storm outside showed no sign of easing as the evening wore fully into night, the wind picking up occasionally to rattle the old window panes in their frames, the rain settling into that full, unhurried percussion that Anton loved best of all, steady and constant enough to eventually stop noticing as separate from silence itself. He finished his tea slowly, refilling at once from the small pot, and let his thoughts wander the way they always did on nights like this, unhurried, drifting easily between memory and simple present comfort. He thought of his teacher, gone now nearly 9 years, and found that the grief of it had settled over time into something gentler than it once was, less a sharp absence and more a kind of ongoing presence, felt most clearly in exactly moments like this one, tea in hand, rain against the glass, the whole small workshop below humming quietly with the accumulated warmth of everyone who had ever ducked in out of the storm to sit a while among the wood and varnish. He thought too of his own eventual successor, years or decades from now perhaps, finding this same notebook tucked behind some future version of the rosin cakes, adding their own careful notes in the margins, leaving their own folded note near the back for whoever came next. The thought didn't feel sad so much as it felt right, part of some much longer, gentler story that the workshop itself seemed to be quietly telling, one rainy afternoon at a time. Eventually, tea finished and the evening's last small satisfactions properly settled, Anton rose to prepare for sleep, moving through the familiar small tasks of the flat with the same unhurried care he carried through everything else on nights like this. He changed to soft, worn sleep clothes, brushed his teeth at the small basin, and paused a moment at his own tired reflection in the narrow mirror above it, thinking, as he often did up here, that he looked a little more like his teacher each year, something about the particular tiredness the workshop always left behind, a good tiredness, the kind earned rather than simply endured. He set the notebook and the small folded notes carefully on his bedside table, along with the old photograph propped against the lamp, and climbed into bed with the rain's steady rhythm filling the small dark room, drumming against the roof directly above him in a sound he had long ago stopped finding anything but deeply comforting.
The heavier blanket at the foot of the bed went mostly unneeded tonight, the flat holding its warmth well against the storm outside, though he pulled it up part way regardless, out of habit more than actual need. He lay a while listening, the way he always did on nights exactly like this one, to the rain against the roof, to the old building's familiar creaks as it settled around him, to the distant, occasional rumble of thunder moving further off now, out beyond the edge of town. Downstairs, he knew, without needing to check, the workshop sat quiet and dark, instruments covered against the damp, the little stove banked low, waiting for morning the way it always was, the way it had been in one form or another for decades before he'd ever taken it over himself. The mind does a curious thing on the edge of sleep, especially after a long, full day spent quietly among people and careful work. It stops sorting so carefully between what is remembered and what is only imagined, and lets the two drift together into something softer than either. Anton lay with eyes closed, not quite asleep, thoughts moving without any real steering, the way a bow draws across a string without needing to be told which direction to travel. He thought he heard, very faintly beneath the rain, his teacher's voice again. Not words exactly, just the warm, patient cadence he'd always used, explaining some small trick of the trade, unhurried and certain, the specific tone reserved for teaching someone the parts of the craft that never quite made it into any book. He thought of the photograph propped against his lamp, his teacher decades younger, laughing behind this same workbench on some long ago rainy afternoon. And in his half-dream, the two evenings seemed to blur gently together, his teacher's crowded, storm-soaked workshop folding easily into his own, as though the same warm wood and varnish had simply been passing, uninterrupted, across all these years. The wind moved against the window, and in his drifting mind it became, briefly, the sound of the old brass bell above the door, ringing for one more late visitor ducking in out of the rain, before he remembered, in the loose logic of half-sleep, that the workshop was closed now, dark and quiet below, and that the sound was only wind, only rain, only the old building settling into its own long night, the same as he was settling into his. Somewhere below, he imagined he could feel the whole small workshop breathing gently around him, full of the accumulated warmth of everyone who had sat inside it that day. Madame Suzuki's crossword, Nadia's quiet admiration, Mr. Castellan's newly adjusted bridge, the young man's grandmother's violin, all of it settled now into the walls themselves, the way good days always seemed to, and Anton felt himself smile faintly in the dark, eyes still closed, feeling entirely, weightlessly content. Tomorrow existed only in the vaguest terms now, the restoration that would need beginning, the strings that would need proper sorting, whatever weather the morning happened to bring, rain or shine, quiet or full. None of it pulled at him the way tasks so often did on ordinary days, demanding speed, demanding urgency. Tonight, everything could simply wait its turn, unhurried, the way the rain was unhurried, the way the workshop itself had always been unhurried, patient through 20 years and decades more before that, waiting faithfully for whoever needed somewhere quiet to sit out their particular storm. The rain went on. The old building held the way it had always held through this storm and every storm before it. And somewhere beneath all that steady sound, Anton's breathing slowed further still and further until it too had settled fully into the storm's own patient rhythm, indistinguishable from the rest. Later, though later meant very little on a night like this, stretched and formless as it was, the rain eased by slow degrees, its steady percussion softening to something closer to a whisper against the roof, gentle now, unhurried, as though the storm itself had simply grown tired and settled in to rest alongside everyone it had passed over that night. Downstairs, the workshop sat dark and quiet, instruments hanging patient from their cords, the little stove's last embers fading slowly toward morning, the notebook's careful notes and the small folded messages waiting patiently in their places, ready for whoever needed them next, tonight or years from now. The small brass bell above the door hung still and silent, saving its ring for whoever the morning happened to bring in out of the rain.